Cache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 330 of the GeoGearHeads. I am Chris of the Northwest, along with your illustrious host, Daryl W4.
Does that mean I have too much light on me?
No, that would be an illuminated host.
Oh,
okay. You're like well lit and busy, illustrious. It's illuminated and industrious.
Got it. Okay. I think I can live with that. But today's show is going to be Earth caching, of course, and we couldn't think of anyone better than the Earth Cache Monkey. So welcome to the show, Land Monkey.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to join you guys. 330 episodes. Man, every time I come back here, it's just some astronomical number of episodes you guys have done. That's awesome. 330. Congratulations.
Maybe we should start like exponential episode numbering.
Once we get to 500, then we do powers of 500.
There you go.
500 to the first power, 500 to the second, 500 to the third.
Awesome. Well, I am really excited to join you guys and talk about Earth caching because I love Earth caches.
Well, thank you for joining us because we were coming apart. You're the glue that holds us together. No, that's too much. Your head's going to be
too much. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, but we couldn't think of anyone else that we wanted on the show more to talk about Earth caches than yourself because, well, you're kind of, the Earth cache junkie over there. Let's give everyone the quick rundown of your credentials there.
Sure. Do you want me to speak to it?
Why don't we let you do it?
Okay, sure. So I've been caching for about 5.5 years. During that time, I've found and answered 366 Earth caches to date. Still, targeting for that magic 500 Earth caches, and we'll get there eventually.
And then you start numbering exponentially.
Exponentially, exactly. Yeah. Okay. And then we'll just keep going. But I've placed 7 Earth caches. I've gotten a start on a number of others. But those 7 have been on a wide variety of geology topics just to keep things interesting for myself, as well as those who try and complete my Earth caches. So in doing that, I've achieved the Earth Cache Master Platinum level, which is the highest level you can get in the Earth Cache system that they have there for their master system, which basically means you have to place a certain number of caches, you have to find a certain number of caches. I think those are the 2 main criteria. And what else? Oh, and I have completed the Earth Cache Academy, and which sadly I don't think is actually live anymore. I went looking for it to see if there's new courses not too long ago, and not there. Made me sad.
Yeah, some of that stuff seems to have wrapped up a couple of years ago, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is gone.
Yeah,
but I'm kind of surprised you're not targeting like 2,000 plus caches so that you'd hit that 1 a day mark.
Well, this is the problem with Earth caches and trying to do something like that, because most areas there's just not enough of them around to be able to do that. But that's great because it means they're rare, they're special, they're very special, just like me. I'm very special. My mom told me that every morning as I got on the short bus. So it's it's good times. But yeah, I have to say, speaking of special that isn't short bus special, your guys' listeners and the social media followers, I popped out a couple of messages yesterday just saying, hey, I'm going to be on this podcast and I want to answer your questions about Earth caching. Does anybody have any questions about Earth caching? And my goodness, the responses that came back are huge. I think we've got enough to do a Earth Cache randomize episode tonight.
Sounds like a good plan. And we'll start off with someone who's local to me, which is Scrap Cat. And she says, why do you actually like Earth caches?
Why do I like
it? She says, how to start creating one. I've heard how difficult it can be to work with the Earth cache reviewers. I have the perfect one to create 2 miles from home that's very unique from anything else in the area.
Very cool. Yeah. So that was a great question. Sounds like she's got a good start on the geology part of that. And creating an earth cache really it's largely about being able to provide a readily digestible geology lesson along with practical examples. The goal at the end is that the cacher should be able to learn something. Now, I want to address the reviewer's comment. So, if people don't know, there is actually a unique set of reviewers specifically for Earth caches. They're called the GeoAware, and so there'll be GeoAware and GeoAware CA for Canada, and GeoAware NZ for New Zealand, and so forth, and so forth and so on. There's a reasonable large number of them, but there's not a ton of them. So they're pretty busy folks, and they've got fairly straightforward guidelines that they're following. Now, my experience with Earth cache reviewers is they're pretty much looking for three things. Is the Earth cache science that you're trying to teach unique enough to that area? Like if there's already 4 Earth caches about waterfalls in the general area that you're creating an Earth cache about waterfalls, you're probably not going to get that approved. In fact, as a general rule, glacial erratics and waterfalls generally don't get approved unless you try and do something unique with it. But anyways, the point being, try and be a little bit unique to your area. Look at the other Earth caches in your general area and try and do something a little bit different than those. That'll help. The next thing that they're looking for is there a clear geology lesson that has some sort of measurable outcomes? Are there some sort of observations that you need to make that either result in needing to do some sort of calculation or something like that? But so clear geology lesson with measurable outcomes. And the third thing I would say, and this we'll talk more about this one later, but this is the one that always catches everybody. Do you have land management permission for people to make the observations required? So we'll talk more about that because that's one that's really being a bit of a challenge right now. And I've got my own opinions that we'll get into later on that. So
wait a minute, you have your own opinions?
I know.
This is the first I've heard.
I know. I'm usually so reserved and I don't really share my thoughts, but tonight I'm going to change that up a little bit. All right. So anyways, sorry, this is Scrapcat?
This is Scrapcat.
Scrapcat. Okay, so Scrapcat,
Yes.
The last thing I have to share with you on there is I really want to encourage you, take that great location you found, do some research on explaining what the geology is, try and target it sort of at a high school level, try and be unique about what you're doing. It sounds like you are, just from what you've alluded to. Ask some questions that reinforce the lesson, and perhaps even get the cacher to think beyond simply what's on the description, the geocache page. So that would be my advice. I really hope you're successful. If you are, tweet me with the GC code when it gets published. I'd love to see what you've come up with.
And Wet Coaster says land monkey opinions are only good in Canada, not valid in the US.
Well, it's the exchange rate. They're valid. They're just less valid in the US than they are in Canada.
They're less valuable.
I am really looking forward to being together with you guys in a month.
Well, that'd be wonderful.
Daryl, you're going to find out just exactly how valuable they are. My good friend.
Just remember, he has to go through border security before he sees you. You're going to be fine.
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Geo Woodstock is going to be so much fun.
It is.
Oh, fun is not the word. Not when land monkey's involved. Because there's education, especially around Earth caches. In fact, on Facebook. Oh, good. Were you going to say something?
I'm just saying I'm here to help, but if you guys want to abuse me, that's fine.
See, you're so polite. It's just so easy to abuse you. Mm-hmm. You say thank you. And sorry. Yeah, or something. There's a U in there. I know that.
Yeah, there is.
Sarah Teasdale Spittle says on Facebook, or asks, where to get information to build an Earth cache around. I'm thinking of building one around an event landslip and the causes and attempted solutions, but so far haven't come up with any meaningful sources of geological relevance. The slip involved over 100 tons of rock and earth and closed a road for a month. A year on, the temporary containment measures are still in place. Land Monkey, what do you think? Where can Sarah find some information for the, you just mentioned it, one of the three things that the reviewers are looking for?
Yeah, awesome. So again, another person sounds like she's off to a really great start. So Sarah, I would say let Google be your friend. See if you can find any references to other landslips or landslides, and the causes and solutions that you've stated. I think this is a great start. Now, I don't know the area, so I don't know if you're going to maybe run into some challenges around landowner permission or anything like that. So I can't speak to that, but just speaking from the earth science perspective, this sounds like a really good start. And it sounds like you've got the area identified. You know what you want to do. So, yeah, start with Google. I would think you've probably already done that, but in case you haven't, I would really encourage that. Make sure that as you're searching through things, you focus on the geology involved. So maybe um, check out the rock formations in that area. Think about why those rock formations might be more prone to landslips than in a neighboring area, something like that. Again, make sure that the questions you're going to answer the questions you're going to ask are going to be answerable based on observations that can be made at the area. That's one of the key things that is always going to be checked on. So, questions like, why are the containment measures still in place? You can discuss other containment methods, ask the cache to determine why they would be more or less effective, things like that. So, just some ideas, but I think you're off to a really good start. Sorry, Gerald.
No, I was going to say the risk with doing something with those containment measures is she mentioned these were temporary. So when they actually do replace them, then the earth cache needs to be updated with it as well. So that can be a risk with doing that.
Yeah, or you can write it in a way that you reference that there were containment methods, have some photos of what it was like. And, if it's cleared in a few years or a year or whenever it is, you'll have the ability to reference that. And then that could even add depth to the earth cache itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just want to, when you're creating it, when you're sculpting the earth cache, make sure that it's something that you're not going to have to go back and edit in 6 months or a year when something changes. And this is one of the reasons why seasonal ones don't work so well either. Well, you have to make sure that you can work around the seasonal, like the vernal ponds are a big thing that we've got a ton of earth caches around here, and they're very seasonal. So there's different answers and different things that it will look for on some of those earth caches depending on what season you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I've created one up in our area around vernal ponds. I think there's only one other one up in this neck of the woods around vernal ponds that I'm aware of. And I had helped do some, what do you call it, CETO work, where they were replanting around the vernal ponds that had been created. So I took the opportunity to go, oh, this would be a great place for an earth cache.
Excellent.
But yeah, so that's an example of a seasonal earth cache. But if you approach it the right way, and as you're saying, Daryl, think longevity on it. I think that's really good advice.
Who's Vern? Why are they naming ponds after him?
Hey, Vern.
Yeah, he's a very famous movie star. So Greenwords tweeted, do you target your earth caches for a particular age or reading level? Say high school as opposed to university? Do you include answers to your questions in the earth cache description, or is that a no-no?
Great question. So the reading level or the writing level that you write it at, that it can be tricky because sometimes the concepts that are involved, you are talking about earth science. So there's going to be times, especially when you're doing the research on the earth science to create the earth cache, it's generally you're going to find written at a university level, and you're going to have to be able to, pardon my language, you're going to have to dumb it down. But I think that's a really good exercise. I would target at what I would call a high school reading level. So yeah, if you want to say grade 9 reading level, whatever specific number you want to attach to it, but not for children. Don't address it to children, but don't use all the techno babble um, and such that you would find in a university dissertation that might be your source. So I think that's good for a few reasons. First of all, geocaching as a whole, the overall premise is to be accessible to all ages. So writing sort of at that mid level helps. The reality is young children are not going to grasp the earth science involved most of the time, but they can be out with their parents and they can get curious about what their parents are talking about and reading about, and it can be a way to teach them. Um, you know, the other thing about writing at that level is it forces you to think through what you're reading in a way, because we always say that the best way to learn something is to teach somebody else, right? So in doing that, in sort of rewriting the technical level, the university level writing into more of a high school level writing, that helps you make sure that you're solid on what you're communicating. And then the last piece, to include answers to questions in the cache description, or is that a no-no? You can ask the questions on whatever you want, as long as it follows those general guidelines. But I try and reduce the ability for people to armchair the Earth cache, as I really want people to get out to ground zero and experience what I experienced when I was there. Um, so I would tend to try, and I know I've done some Earth caches where the answers are in the description. You just have to read it and ta-da, you're done. But I kind of like the idea of actually getting out there and being in a situation where I have to make some sort of observations, whether it's temperature or physical, the visual look of something, the look of something, the feel of something, the tactile description, things like that. Just makes it more enjoyable.
Well, Land Monkey, you're right. I've read some of those geology texts of the areas, and I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable. And I look at this and I go, I don't understand the words that are in front of me. Yeah. So I have to, as I'm going, I have to have Google open. What does this really mean? What does this really mean? Yeah. And they may have started from 100 million years ago to 10 and end up at 10 years ago, and you're like, wait, where this look at all this that has happened. And it's really hard to follow and to, as you said, and it is crude, but to dumb it down, to bring it to a more accessible level for people to understand it. And that feeds really well into our next question. This one comes from Helen of the Land Sharks. How not to plagiarize your research material and also write an educational piece at a grade 9 reading level.
Right on. So yeah, I think that exactly carries on with what we were just talking about from Green Words. One of the ways to get around the plagiarizing piece, because sometimes there's text that's really just well written in the research material that you found that just, it sums it up perfectly. You're like, you know what? I don't want to rewrite this. I just need to use this. So, just like any other work, you can cite, and then it's not plagiarizing. So, you put the quotes around the text that you need to use that works really well for your Earth cache description, and put a footnote number on it at the bottom of your page, cite your source. The Earth cache reviewers are great with that. They love that, because then in fact, it means, yes, you've gone out and done some research and you're citing an expert in the field on this. So as long as what you're writing about is the correct thing that's there, that's a great idea. I talked as well earlier about reframing the research material in your own words. Make sure that it makes sure that you understand it, so that there's value in doing that. So I guess to answer that part of your question, Helen, feel free to cite things. I think that's valuable. And yeah, just that iterative process of reading the material, rereading it, and maybe Googling and looking for some other material that maybe is written a little more accessibly if you're struggling with it. And then the piece about grade 9 reading level, yeah, we were talking about that. So, it's a guideline to say sort of grade 9, but I'd say aim somewhere between writing for kids and writing for your university dissertation on the topic. Go for plain language wherever possible, which is a good rule in life in general, but that's what I'd say.
Yeah. And, don't let that cited piece of material be 80% of your description.
Yeah.
It's written really well, so I'm going to copy the 3 pages right out of the geology book. Well, no, that's not quite what we're looking for either.
Right. So yeah, I guess maybe if that's what Ellen was getting at, then definitely, pick a couple key sentences out of there that really make the point. Cite them, and then reword them right underneath in the next paragraph and say, when I read this is what I'm understanding they're saying.
So we've gotten we found a good spot. We have done our research and then rewritten it to, meet the more common man. But Breiling wants to know, how do you write a good question? For, okay, we've got this information. How do we pose a question out of that?
Right. Well, next to getting landowner permission, that's probably the hardest part. You can hire a monkey for that. They work for Timbits. Like I said, I use Google a lot as a research tool, but I've also gone out and I have a couple of geology books. They're not textbooks. They're called roadside geology. There are roadside geology books written for a number of different areas. There's one for Southwest BC where I live, and it's a fantastic book. It's a little heavy, so you have to kind of really be into the topic, but you can also sort of pick and choose the chapters based on the area and the geology you're most interested in. So that's another good option. Look for interpretive signs in the area that you're writing about. Take lots of pictures. I would always recommend of the interpretive signs, but also of the area itself, because sometimes you might think, oh, okay, I read the interpretive sign. It's about this. I'll take a picture of the same viewpoint where the interpretive sign is. And you might miss something important that's in that area that's related to it all. So that's ways to sort of start to turn the material into questions. When you're coming up with the questions, try and write the questions. Again, I would encourage you to make the visitor do their own observations and come up with their own hypotheses. So you try and write the questions in a way that you're framing the person towards that. So you kind of point them towards something.
Another thing that I'd probably recommend is when you're putting together this description, try to put the questions and the really important instructions toward the top, because you could run into issues with a length limit on the device. And Len Mickey, I'm sure you've seen this many times, where you'll get these earth caches where you only get like half of the cache description, and none of it is relevant to the earth cache because it just cuts it off on that GPSR.
Yeah. My GPSR is pretty good that it will have everything, but it's a pain in the butt to do an earth cache on a GPSR. So as much as I am the guy who caches by GPSR all the time, I will use the GPSR to get me to the point. And then I will, usually what we have is Mrs. Monkey's tablet with us, or my smartphone. And I will read through the earth cache on there. And then I will also use it to, because we use CGeo, I'll put my answers in the notes section on CGeo right then and there. And then I don't have to worry about it later. So good advice, Daryl, though. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and if you're hunting for it, make sure that, before you go, read the description, read the questions, and make sure that you know what's going on. In many cases, you'll need special tools.
Terrain, difficulty, description, and attributes. Check all 4 of those before you go and try and do the earth cache. The worst thing that can happen is you get out to some location where you've either driven for a long time or hiked a long time. You get there and you're like, crap. Well, I can guess at it. And I'll tell you one thing. If the difficulty rating is high on an earth cache, regardless of the terrain rating, if the difficulty rating is high, they're more than likely going to want very specific answers. And you may end up with a little back and forth with the Earth cache owner. If difficulty rating is high, that is an indicator that the question might be tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the
Definitely.
equipment that you'll need varies a lot between regions. Around here, it's always helpful to have some kind of known size container because they'll measure things like flow rates.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
you want to be able to take, okay, this quart, it fills 4 times in a minute, and that's, that's my flow rate. Then the pH strips for your aquarium are a big one that they use a lot around here.
Really?
So
I haven't
as
run
you
into
start,
one of those yet.
yeah, we've had quite a few of those, and they're usually for things like the springs, or even sometimes for ponds.
Okay. Now I have
So-
a thermometer I bring with me.
Well, we even have some that are measuring the specific gravity of the water, so the salt level.
Wow.
Because we actually have some salt springs or salt mines and stuff like that in the area, and you can measure the runoff and whatnot. So they're looking for that kind of stuff. So as you get into the earth caches in the area, you'll start figuring out what you need to have with you. And if you're going to a new area, make sure that that's, your kit is complete for whatever missions you have to accomplish there.
Good stuff.
Let's get back into more questions. This one comes to us from Mike via Facebook. How about asking why there is so much inconsistency between reviewers? I had one rejected because it is a man-made object, then found out that 2 similar Earth caches had been published 2 months prior, and that there were 9 on the subject published total. 2 were published by the reviewer that rejected mine. Mine also has more geology than the others.
That's a tricky question. So first of all, Mike, I'm sorry to hear about those challenges. I'm hoping you were able to ask the reviewer for their reasoning as to why it wasn't approved. But one thing I would say is keep in mind that just like geocaching guidelines for all the reviewers in general, the guidelines for the Earth cache reviewers do change and evolve over time. So it may be a situation where something was okay a year ago, and in the past year, something's changed and it's not now. So things that may work one year may not work the next. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just throwing out possibilities because I don't know the specifics of this scenario. And like I said, I feel bad for you. I'm sorry that's happened, but maybe you'll be able to find a way to work through this with them. Again, the goal is to create an educational experience about the earth sciences. It sounds like if you've got lots of geology in yours and you're in the right direction, maybe you just need to tweak it up a bit. And maybe ask the Earth cache reviewer, the GeoAware, for some assistance on, if they were doing this Earth cache, what would they do differently? And, often I've found that they're actually pretty accommodating and prompting you in a helpful direction.
Well, I seem to remember we had at one point, and probably still, a prohibition on one particular type of earth cache in our area because it was oversaturated with that. I think it was like monitoring stations or something like that. So they just didn't want any more here, but they were still allowing it anywhere else. And I think now they've just said, no, none of those whatsoever. But anything that has been published is grandfathered. So that's why you'll find some of those out there that aren't allowed anymore because they decided to change it and they're not going to retract the existing listings.
Yeah, it's just like geocaching in general, right? You come across that with all kinds of different geocaches where something's changed, and so there's some grandfathered ones that are out there that don't do anymore.
Yeah, and this is the big thing that always comes up is just because someone else's cache got published doesn't mean that yours will. It could be that those got through on a bad day and no one noticed that they were doing something they shouldn't have been doing. Doesn't necessarily mean it was even okay when they did it. It just means it got through.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, Daryl, for sure. So yeah, I don't know the specific idea that this one was working on, or the reviewer's reasoning, but as an example, and just because he was talking about man-made structures, you can't get an earth cache approved about a dam. You can't say, "Oh, this earth cache is about this big hydroelectric dam. But if you don't focus on the dam, but rather maybe the valley that the dam is in, or the downstream impacts that the dam's hydrology is having on the geology, you might have better luck with that. So just throwing that out there as ideas.
Gary also asked on Facebook how to get permission. It's the biggest stumbling block.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. So it was funny that Gary asked this. I don't know if you guys know Gary. He's one of the original GeoWares. So one of the guys who definitely feels the pain of not being able to get permission at times. And I'll be frank. Sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you've got an amazing idea for an earth cache, and you just cannot get the landowner to respond to you. And it's not that they're saying no; you're just not getting a response at all. And then the reviewers are, they've got their hands up in the air and saying, "Well, it's in a location where we need to have, approval for, or we need to have permission." So you end up in a stalemate. You're frustrated because you've invested all this time in it. So I want to mentally prepare you that those things can happen in creating earth caches. It's frustrating, it's challenging, but here's some things you can try to help you through those gates. So first of all, check with your local geocaching association. They may know who the landowners are, and they may already have a connection with the landowner, so they can get an answer for you quicker or point you to the right person. So that's one. The obvious is following up with the parks office, whether it's a local park, state or provincial park or national park. Of course, the larger the organization, the more challenging it gets to get to a person and get a question answered. But give it a try. Something else that I think not a lot of people know about, because it's really hidden, but it's super, super useful, is geocaching.com has something called a regional geocaching wiki. It's Daryl, are you able to share that URL that I put in the show notes for that?
Yeah, we'll have that in the show notes as well.
Sweet. Okay. If you're listening, it's wiki.groundspeak.com /display/geo/home. It will actually bring you to an indexable, a wiki that's indexed by geographical location. And once you sort of narrow in and get down to the level of where you live or where you're trying to put the earth cache, it will have a whole lot of all of the placement rules and the land management rules for your area. That they're all in there. The reviewers use this as well. So it's a good thing to know. It's a handy tool. It's accessible to all of us geocachers. You just need to know it's there. As I said before, asking the reviewers, ask the GeoAware reviewers. Maybe they know, maybe somebody else has already gotten permission for one of these and they can look it up in a previous note. Ask your local geocaching reviewer. They might already know who the land manager is for the area you're trying to work with. Last thing on this topic, I'm going to say, it's so important how you ask. So you got to remember, when you're making the request to place an earth cache in a park, even if it's a park that already has a whole bunch of traditionals and whatever else in it, you got to assume these people don't know what geocaching is. And they especially won't know what earth caching is. So when you're asking the muggles for permission, you have to very carefully explain what an earth cache is using simple language, no geo jargon or acronyms. Try and keep your message positive. Focus on the fact that it's low to no impact. It's ideal if you're using existing park areas and trails so that people are already walking here. I'm not asking for you to approve for somebody to do anything that people don't normally do in the park. And maybe think about what's in it for the land manager. Is this an opportunity to draw more people to their park and to a particular interpretive area in their park? Is it an opportunity for people to better understand the geology of that part of the park? Can you increase awareness of environmental issues or impacts through your earth cache about that part of the park? Like, think about selling this to the land manager in your request for permission. Because if you just say, hey, I want permission to put an earth cache in these coordinates in your park, you're probably not going to have a lot of luck. So there you go. There's my advice.
Nice. we have feedback from Limax, who happens to be in the chat with us this evening. He says, when scouting a location for an earth cache, what do you look for in features in order to make it an interesting place to put one? Do you prefer places with plaques? Like an artery.
Yeah.
Oh wait, that's different.
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer these in the reverse order. So first, about the plaques thing. Plaques help. So for sure, it can be helpful. Like I've said before, Google the geology of the area as well, though. You might be surprised at the number of hits you're going to get if you start Googling the information. But the plaque can be a great way to get started. Definitely take as many photos as you can of the plaque so that you can reread the information later and double check things. I've mentioned the roadside geology type books. See if there's one for that area as well. Not all the best spots to create an earth cache may have plaques. Some might not, but many do. Absolutely. If you're doing that, please don't just regurgitate the information on the plaque and then leave out a couple things and ask the question of your only questions in your earth cache basically mean that somebody had to read the plaque. That's boring. Like, try and do something where they're observing something about the area and thinking about the area they're in. So, a plaque is a great way to start. It makes for a head start on it. And usually if there's a plaque there, you're going to have a lot less problems with landowner permission. So it's a good way to get started on an earth cache for sure. Just don't base it all on the plaque is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, I have an earth cache, and the first question is based on the plaque. And I'm amazed the number of people that, have Googled the answer, because I can tell the difference between what's on the plaque and what Google responds. And I'm like, sorry, that's not right. And, at first I was like, well, okay, they tried. And I go, no, they're armchairing this. No, read the plaque, and then you'll be able to know what was there. If you were there, you read the plaque.
Yeah, well, so, I've done yours, and it requires that you also are at the area because you need to make some observations about what you're seeing beyond the plaque.
Exactly. No, I mean, I want to give them one easy question, one they have to think about a bit, and then I made it optional, but one to really stretch.
Yeah.
And, so you're building up to it. So, I don't want just a drive-by earth cache of, I got 2 answers off the plaque, I'm good. You need to think a little bit about it. And the one that, is talking about, I've forgotten the term, prominence. There it is. That one, it's really hard to guess. I mean, people have really come up with some good answers and well, I'm here. I know the peak of the mountain's there, so it must be. That's fine. That's getting you to think. But I've made that optional because there is no scientific way to measure that at the location that you're stopping at.
Not without some specialized equipment anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I said, I've done that one, Chris, and I thought you did a great job on that one. So that's exactly the kind of stuff we're talking about. Use the plaque as a starting point. And you do, like when somebody reads through your earth cache and if they're at the site and they read the plaque, they go, oh, that's what he's talking about. And then if they read your description a little bit further and they get into your more difficult question, you're pretty well equipped at that point to make an educated guess about it. And I think that's really what you want, because you can get pretty close with that, given the information on the plaque and given your observations you make in the field. You can make a pretty close, educated guess.
And it's at a plaque, so the landowner wants you to be there. It's a pull off on the freeway, which I think, plaques are a great place to start. It gives you that visual indication. Yes, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Limax has a question that he wants to run by everyone. Based on the geology of the area and the colors you see, who won the 1924 World Series?
Yeah, that one's probably going to get stuck with GeoAware. I don't think they're going to pass that one.
Well, I thought it was great.
You definitely have to do some work.
Yeah. But you can armchair that one.
Is it, I think Tick Magnet after that said he was at White Sands National Park, New Mexico, and the signs were changed?
That's one of the risks of using those signs and the placards.
Exactly.
We have Bounce in the chat, and he really brings up a good point. He says, as a land manager and owner, I worry more about the liability if someone gets hurt on my property. It also depends on what the property is currently being used for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing, that most earth caches are on public lands of some sort. So when you're looking for permission, you're actually looking for permission for a park for the most part. Now, that's not exclusive. There are a lot of other different earth caches. And definitely, if your earth cache was directing people to go onto private property, you're probably going to have a really hard time unless it's your own private property. Because, yeah, Bounce makes a really good point about that. So, it's all stuff to be considered.
Right.
I don't think I finished answering Limax's question, though. I think we got off on a...
Who won the 24 World Series?
Yeah, something like that. So it was, what kind of features do we look for to make an interesting place to put it? And personally, I just look for something unique about the area's geology. So I may not understand exactly what it is at first, but a little bit of research helps me learn and then form questions to help others learn. Things I look for is easy access, the ability to make observations from a safe location. I try and create ones where you don't have to interfere with what you're seeing. So if there is a tactile component to it, it's like a piece of granite or very hard piece of rock that, okay, gently feel the surface of this rock. Is it coarse or fine or something like that, rather than chip a piece of this rock off or grab a chunk of this clay. And some of those, there's nothing wrong with it depending on where it is, but it's those kind of things are just going to make it more and more difficult for you to get it approved. The more interference you're asking people to do with the location.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, and especially thanks to everyone who's written in and pretty much created the show for us with all these great questions. Before we take off, we have probably a couple of minutes to run through the Land Monkey, not quite top 10, but 10 significant favorite Earth caches list.
Oh, awesome. I didn't know if we'd have time for this. All right. So quickly, I put together a list of 10 of my favorite Earth caches. These are in no particular order, and these aren't, there's so many that I've gone to and I've loved that I couldn't cut it down to 10. But here's 10 really fascinating, well done, amazing Earth caches that if you get an opportunity to do them. So first one, Marjorie Glacier in Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. GC33E9G. Pretty much the only access to that one is cruise ship access. But if you're doing an Alaskan cruise, it's probably going to go there, and it's definitely worth doing. And thumbs up to Mrs. Land Monkey and Mrs. Land Sharks, who did that Earth cache from a hot tub. All right. One of my favorite stories.
The only way to Earth cache.
Clearly. Number 2, Rainbow's End Grand Prismatic Spring. That is in Yellowstone National Park, GC1JY47. It's the largest hot spring in Yellowstone Park. It's channels out of the hot spring that are populated with extremophiles, which are organisms, bacterial type organisms that live in physically extreme conditions. And it's just the most beautiful, amazing thing. So definitely that's high on my list. A little closer to home for me, it's one called Hang Down Your Head Tombolo. It's GC6GJW7. Tombolo is it's an islet that's connected to the mainland by a spit. This one's in West Vancouver, British Columbia, in Whitecliff Park. It's a good Earth cache, and the location is just beautiful. So I just love that one for that. Number 4, Inferno Cone, GC4FZKB. That is in Craters of the Moon National Park in Idaho. Craters of the Moon, what can I say about that park? It's otherworldly. It's a must-go place. You got to check it out. Number 5, again, we're getting a little closer to home for us, Chris. Big 4 Ice Caves, GC1575A. That is a Northwest gem. There are not enough faves on that cache. Not enough people are getting out and finding that. Got to go there. Got to check that out. Number 6 takes me to Utah. Boy, I had such a hard time picking earth caches from Utah because love your state, Utah. You guys rock. Anyways, I picked a great example because it's one of the lesser known earth cache locations in the state of Utah, unless you're a local. It's called Goblin Valley, GC1796W. You will swear you are on Mars when you were doing this earth cache. It's actually where scenes from Galaxy Quest and other films were filmed. You can actually walk out amongst the hoodoos. It's an amazing location. Of course, Arches National Park and pretty much any of the parks in Utah are definitely worth checking out. Keeping it moving. Number 7, called Holy Tafoni, GC6FHAJ. It's in Arizona, has super easy access. It is a very popular location with some amazing views. It's a cool earth cache. It is a Tafoni. If you guys follow the geocaching vlogger, Joshua, he very recently was there and shared some photos and video from that exact location. So very cool spot. Number 8, the Lewis and Clark Caverns. Now, talking about hidden gems. This is in Montana. You can get guided tours through these caverns. They're just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And there's an earth cache that you answer by taking the guided tour through the caverns. GC3T80G. Definitely worth doing. Number 9, called Earth, Sun, and Water. This is in Oregon. GC4X01K. It is a very unique example of columnar basalt. So a lot of people have probably, if you've done some earth caching, you've found columnar basalt. It's usually stacked very orderly, it's a fascinating, columnar basalt's fascinating on its own, but I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to tell you this one is highly unique. You're going to not find very many in the world at all like this one. It's on the Molalla Forest Road, south from Molalla, Oregon. So check that one out. Last one that I'll share is it was a milestone cache for us. It's I can never pronounce this right, so I apologize to anyone who is native Spanish speaking or speaks Spanish better than I do. Cueva de Ambrosio, GC2DDG4. It's in Cuba. It's a location that has both geological significance and historical significance from the slave trade era. It's near the resorts in Veradero, has easy access via the tour bus. And you get to share it with bats when you're in there, which is kind of cool. So yeah.
Very cool.
There's 10 must-do earth caches from the Land Monkey.
Excellent. And tell people where they can find more about you and your adventures.
Awesome. Thanks, Daryl. Folks, you can follow us at LandMonkeyGC any time of the day or night. We are on a hashtag geocache road trip most of the time and posting photos and videos and sharing our crazy adventures with you. So do that, or check us out on YouTube, Land Monkey on YouTube, and you'll find our videos, many of them from earth caches.
And you'll be doing a road trip to Geo Woodstock in less than a month?
You got it, bro.
Yeah, less than a month. And we are going to be there along with Podcacher and Geocache Talk in the media area. And we're going to have drawings at 11 and 3 p.m. So if you're going to be at Geo Woodstock, that's when you'll want to show up and meet us and the other podcasters.
Definitely. But if you want to hear podcasters, you can listen to this show. Next week, episode 331, we're going to talk about geocaching competitions. The week after that, attending megas or even gigas. On May 17th, we're talking with Cache Turno. And on May 24th, we're having a randomize. I don't know this number, but it looks like Lixfix.
Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Hoffenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2018 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.